Well, I wanted to jump forward in time a little bit to working with Crossfade and their song Cold. And they had also like two other number one hits on that, or top 10 hits on that record. And what year was this? And what was it like being in the major label ecosystem at that time? Because it's like peak record sales, radio still actually pays money. I feel like this was like the MTV Cribs, like before Napster ruined everything.
It was right as Napster had come and gone, and everything was downloads. And
Okay.
there were still record stores. Record labels still had street marketing teams that would go to record stores with posters and listening copies and, with a bunch of concert tickets in them for the manager of the record store. But I found Crossfade through taxi.com, and I was working at a record label that did dead guy stuff. It's called a heritage record label, put out all the new Lead Belly and John Lee Hooker and all sorts of different,
Dead guy stuff.
yeah, dead guy stuff, reggae, early reggae. We had Julian Lennon and Jethro Tull and Ian Hunter, who did all the young dudes with Mott the Hoople, and everything else we put out was dead guy stuff. And I wanted to manage, and I ran a listing with Taxi and heard Ed from Crossfade and said, this I can work with. And we worked for about 2 years doing A&R. He would FedEx me something, and I'd get it the next day and listen to it and make notes and call him on the phone and do A&R on the phone. And we put together a record, and they had the worst name ever. I got a band called Sugar Daddy Superstar that sounds like a wrestler in a mask to sign to Columbia Records. And yeah, we had a song that was on the radio in their hometown that was the number one song on the commercial station. And Charleston and Augusta, they were from Columbia, South Carolina. Charleston and Augusta picked it up, and the radio people were going back to the label like, who the fuck is this? They're stealing our spins. And they invited us to New York. We did a showcase, and 3 songs in, this was really old school. Don Einer, who ran Columbia after Tommy Mottola, he had his off-duty NYPD guard and his on-duty La Cosa Nostra guard with him. And they walk in with everybody that works at Columbia walking behind him like he's the father duck. And they sit down, and 3 songs into the showcase, he stands up and said, you must be the manager, and pointed at me. And I said, yes, sir. He's like, who's your lawyer? And I said, oh, Alan Mintz. He's like, oh, that guy used to work for me. Tell him to call me tomorrow. Welcome to Columbia. And he just got up and walked out. And then all the little ducks followed him except the duck who was going to be the one that we reported to, and that was John Delp, who's a legendary A&R guy. And they put out the record that we recorded on our own. They didn't change anything except they got it remixed. So I did the A&R on that. The record came out the 29th of April, 2004, and we slowly
changed their name before this showcase.
Oh no,
Sugar
we were
Daddy
still
Superstars.
that was mentioned. Like, you have to change your name, but welcome to Columbia was the actual quote. And we're like, yeah, no problem. And Cold came out, and they slowly worked it in the Southeast, and it was April 2024, and it stayed in the top 20 for 65 weeks at Hard Rock and 48 weeks at Alternative Rock. And it was the most played record of the year in the country in 2005 because those Cold never went away. It went in the top 20 for 65 weeks and then straight into regular rotation on these stations, where it still sits today. And
yeah,
so that's how we got the most played record of the year. And it was a lot of fun. I got to deal with everything, like you said, the big major label ecosystem, the billboards, the tour bus, the radio stations, all that stuff. My friend Mick Rock is a pretty famous photographer. Mm-hmm. And I had spoken to him, and he said, whatever your budget, I'll shoot your band. And I went into the meeting where we were planning the artwork and the photos and everything. And I said, well, I want Mick Rock to shoot the band. And they all looked at each other and laughed and said, no, we don't have the budget for him. We only have a $10,000 budget. I said, hang on. And I called Mick and said, 10 grand? He said, okay, love, see you tomorrow at the studio. and everyone in the room looked like, whoa, he just called Mick Rock on his home phone.